I've heard so many stories about cheating spouses, both husbands and wives. Everyone handles being cheated on in their own way, but it's pretty common to imagine most men would lose it if they walked in on their wife with another guy. A lot of these tales start the same way. The husband comes home earlier than usual, notices a strange car parked in the driveway. He sneaks inside, quiet as can be, and follows the sounds coming from the bedroom. The door is always cracked just enough for him to peek through. And there, on his bed, his wife is tangled up with some stranger. She's completely lost in the moment, calling out for more, totally unaware her husband's standing there, watching. I can't wrap my head around how some guys react in these situations. They catch their wife in the act, but instead of doing something, they just freeze. It's like their brain just shuts down. Some even slip back out the way they came, sneak out of the house, and head to the nearest bar to drown their shock in whiskey. Then, they act like nothing happened and start scheming for some kind of payback later on. Is that what a man's supposed to do? Hell no. I think those guys who stand there and do nothing are cowards. You let some other man have your wife, and you're too scared to confront it because you don't want to mess up your tidy little world. Some even stand there, frozen, watching their so-called love get taken by someone else. To those understanding husbands or boyfriends, I say screw that. It happened to me, and I didn't just stand around and let it happen. I'll tell you exactly what I did. Natalie and I were married for 11 years. We had 2 kids, Logan, who was 10, and Chloe, 8. For the longest time, I thought we had a solid marriage. In the beginning, like most couples, we couldn't keep our hands off each other. Our sex life was pretty exciting too, mostly regular stuff, but we experimented here and there. We even tried a few ideas from one of those Spice Up Your Relationship books. Some of it was great, and some didn't really work out. But I wasn't afraid to push the boundaries a little for Natalie. I'm a big guy, sturdy and strong, not the type to be easily intimidated. I made sure to give Natalie what she wanted, even if it wasn't always my favorite thing. I did it because she did her best to keep me happy too. She wasn't perfect, but she tried, and that meant something. One of my favorite positions was having her from behind. I'd grip her hips and just go for it, and she kept up with me, every step of the way. I'll admit, she was good. Her favorite? Being on top. It worked out well on the nights when I didn't have the energy to take control. She'd take over, and I'd kick back, playing with her while she did the work. Now, I know I might sound bitter, and yeah, maybe I am, but I wasn't always like this. Grudges have a way of sticking with you. I should probably let it go, but that's easier said than done. Like a lot of young couples, we found ourselves in debt. We wanted everything right away, the kind of stuff it took our parents years to afford. It wasn't just Natalie who was overspending, I was guilty too. Big screen TVs, high-end appliances, you name it. We dug ourselves into a hole. I was already putting in 6 days a week at the factory, but it still wasn't enough. The economy took a nosedive, and those profit-sharing checks we used to count on kept shrinking. That's when Natalie suggested she get a job. I didn't like the idea at first, it made me feel like I wasn't doing enough as a man. But what choice did we have? She landed a job at a department store. The pay wasn't much, but the hours fit around the kids' schedules. The downside? We barely saw each other anymore, and our sex life started fading away. She'd tell me she was too exhausted between work and the kids, and I understood. There were nights when I wasn't feeling up to it either. Our arguments shifted. Before, we'd fight about money. Now, it was about housework. Natalie said I wasn't pulling my weight, and maybe she was right. I tried to pitch in more, but no matter what I did, it was never good enough for her. If I cleaned, it wasn't the way she liked it. That led to more fights. And when we fought, it meant no sex. That was how she punished me, for not doing things exactly her way. Eventually, I found myself spending more time at the bar while Natalie was at work. I was frustrated, feeling lonely, and worn down. The kids were often at their grandparents' place since they had a pool, something we couldn't afford. At the bar, I met a few women, but I never crossed any lines. Sure, I bought them a drink here and there, and we'd chat, but that was it. Somehow, word got back to Natalie about me hanging around at the bar, and she wasn't happy about it. She accused me of messing around with other women and threw it in my face, saying if I was going to cheat, she could too. I told her none of it was true, that whoever was spreading rumors had it all wrong. But she refused to tell me where she heard it from. Instead, she stormed off to bed and locked the door behind her. I thought about kicking the door down but didn't feel like dealing with the hassle of fixing it later. I figured she'd cool off eventually, so I just crashed on the couch. At that point, our marriage was a mess. We bickered over the smallest things, barely spoke like adults anymore, and constantly threw around divorce as a threat over trivial nonsense. The kids spent more and more time at Natalie's parents' house, probably because they didn't want to be around while we argued. I knew it hurt them to see us like that. One Friday, I told Natalie I was taking the next day off to go fishing, just to clear my head. She wasn't happy about it. "We need money, and you're taking a day off. What's wrong with you?" That started another fight, with her accusing me of taking one of the women from the bar with me. I had no idea where she was getting these crazy ideas, but again, she wouldn't tell me. The truth was, one of the women at the bar had started showing interest in me recently. I liked the attention, sure, but I never acted on it. We'd flirt a little, and once she even grabbed me. I'll admit it felt good, but I stopped things before they went any further. I told her, yeah, my marriage was on the rocks, but I wasn't going to cheat on Natalie. So that Saturday, I got up, grabbed my fishing gear, and headed out. I was gone for about 4 hours, and by the time I was ready to head home, my mind felt clearer. There's something about being alone in nature that helps you get your thoughts straight. Fishing has always done that for me. I realized how stupid Natalie and I had been acting, both of us too stubborn to sit down and actually talk. So I decided I'd go home and try to have a real conversation, like adults. But when I pulled into the driveway, there was a strange car parked outside. My mind immediately went to all those stories I'd heard about guys coming home to find their wives with another man. I walked into the house as quietly as I could, listening. Then I heard Natalie's voice, "Ryan, this isn't right, even if Ethan's cheating on me." I peeked into the living room, and there was Ryan, his hand on Natalie's chest. Her blouse was unbuttoned, and her bra was pushed up. I stepped into the room. "Oh my God, Ethan. What are you doing home?" "This isn't what it looks like," Natalie stammered. What a ridiculous thing to say. We both knew exactly what it looked like. I grabbed Ryan and yanked him off the couch. His pants were undone, and he was exposed. I hit him hard in the gut, then followed up with a right hook to his jaw. I'm pretty sure I dislocated it. He flew across the room, knocking over a table and a lamp in the process. I jumped on top of him and kept pounding him, punch after punch. When I finally stood up, I kicked him where it would hurt the most. The whole time, Natalie was screaming at me to stop. I grabbed what was left of Ryan, dragged him to the door, and tossed him out onto the front lawn. "You're a cheating tramp. Get out of my house." I yelled at Natalie. I grabbed her too, and as she screamed, I threw her out, her chest still exposed. Then I slammed the door shut and locked it. I could hear her shouting from outside, begging me to let her back in, pleading for me to call an ambulance for Ryan. I didn't do either. Within minutes, the cops and an ambulance were on the scene. They pounded on the door, threatening to break it down if I didn't open up. I swung the door open, and they rushed inside. They ordered me to get on the ground, face down, legs spread. One of the officers jammed his knee into my back while he cuffed me. I watched as the paramedics loaded an unconscious Ryan into the ambulance. By that time, Natalie had fixed her clothes, covering herself up. The officers took her statement, but I kept my mouth shut. They read me my rights, and I still refused to say a word. Then they shoved me into the squad car and took me to jail. Later, Natalie called and even tried to come see me. I told the officers I didn't want to talk to her. It was one of the few rights I still had left. An officer named Chris, who seemed like a decent guy, came by my holding cell for a chat. "Off the record, Ethan, what happened?" he asked. "Communication, or the lack of it," I replied. "I walked in on my wife about to sleep with some guy on my couch. I'm not the type to stand by and watch that happen." "Did you hear her side of the story?" Chris asked. "Chris, let's not complicate this. She wasn't forced. She was doing it willingly. What kind of man would I be if I just stood by and accepted that? I did what I had to do, and now I'll deal with the consequences." I refused to post bail. There was no point wasting money that my family could use, just so I could walk back into that mess. They told me they'd get me a public defender, and that was fine by me. I figured I could use a couple of days to cool off anyway. Later, Chris brought me a letter from Natalie. I told him I didn't even want to look at it. When I finally met with my lawyer, he didn't beat around the bush. I was in deep trouble. His advice was to plead insanity. I just laughed and told him I knew exactly what I was doing that day. I even added that if that jerk ever came near Natalie again, I'd give him the same treatment. I asked if I'd killed him. "You came close," my lawyer said. "He's got a broken jaw, 2 fractured ribs, and a couple of black eyes. The police couldn't even get a statement from him because he can't talk. Right now, all they have is your wife's version of events. I'll be speaking to her tomorrow. Anything you want me to tell her?" "Yeah," I said. "Tell her she's free to sleep with whoever she wants now. I want a divorce." I had become a cold, hard man. You have to be like that when you're locked up. I refused to see Natalie or speak to her. The only messages I received were from my kids, telling me they missed me and wanted me to come home, as if I could just walk out the door and go back. 2 months went by since the beating, and my trial was getting closer, at least the pre-trial was. The only witnesses were Natalie and Ryan, who I found out worked with her. I was sitting in the courtroom when they wheeled Ryan in. He was in a wheelchair now. Turns out, I'd broken his leg when I tossed him out. His jaw was still wired shut, though most of the bruising had faded. My lawyer leaned in and whispered that Ryan had surgery to remove his testicles because of the damage I'd done. He wouldn't be able to have kids. Ryan was married, but after all this, his wife was divorcing him. He had written most of his statements because talking was still tough for him. Then I saw Natalie standing by the courtroom door, and a wave of anger and hurt washed over me. She was there as a reluctant witness. They said she didn't have to testify against me, but she did need to give her version of what happened. So, I was about to hear everything. Ryan was the first to give his testimony. He claimed, or rather wrote, that Natalie had invited him over, and they were getting intimate when I stormed in and attacked him before he had any chance to defend himself. He said that both he and Natalie were consenting adults, and I didn't let them explain anything before I went straight to violence. I had to bite back the urge to go after him again. If I could've, I would have. Natalie shot him a disgusted look and then glanced at me, tears running down her face. Next, it was Natalie's turn. She explained that Ryan had been flirting with her at work for some time, but she always turned him down. Recently, though, Ryan started feeding her lies, telling her that I was cheating on her. At first, she didn't believe him and said she had talked to me about it. But one day, Ryan showed her pictures of some woman with her hand in my lap. That's when it hit me who Ryan really was. I had seen him hanging around at Dan's bar, where I'd been drinking. He had kept his distance, but now I realized he'd been spying on me. Natalie continued, saying that after seeing the pictures, she was devastated. Ryan kept telling her that she should get even with me, that she should do what he claimed I was doing. She admitted she felt hurt and confused. "I love Ethan, but when you're hurt, you don't think clearly," she said. She told Ryan that I was going fishing that weekend, and Ryan told her he'd overheard me asking a woman at the bar to go with me. Feeling betrayed, she just wanted to hurt me back. She admitted, "I don't know what I was thinking." She went on, saying that when I left that Saturday morning without even saying goodbye and the kids went to her mom's, she was left at home alone, stewing over what I might be up to. Ryan showed up at the door, claiming he thought she could use some company since I was out cheating on her. The whole thing was a setup, and I could only hope the judge saw through it. But the fact that Natalie let him into the house didn't exactly help my case. And with him sitting there in a wheelchair, it probably wasn't winning me any sympathy either. Natalie kept going. She said that Ryan came in and she made him coffee. They talked about what I might be doing, and then Ryan started getting handsy. He unbuttoned her blouse and pulled up her bra. "I didn't want him, I wanted Ethan," she said. "But I just sat there and let him touch me." Then, she said, Ryan unzipped his pants. She told him it wasn't right, even if I had cheated. And that's when I walked in. She said I grabbed Ryan and started beating him. She was terrified I was going to kill him. She screamed for me to stop, but I was too far gone, too enraged. I threw Ryan out the door, called her names, and shoved her out right behind him. A few minutes later, the police and ambulance arrived. Natalie was crying on the stand, tears pouring down her face. "I've tried to reach Ethan, but he won't talk to me. I was so stupid, so stupid," she said as she stepped down, still sobbing. She glanced my way, and I felt a rush of emotions, anger, pain, confusion. According to her, nothing had actually happened between them, and maybe it wouldn't have if I hadn't walked in when I did. I could see how much she was hurting, but there was nothing I could do to change the damage that had been done. Our lives were in pieces. When it was finally my turn to give a statement, I made the mistake of saying that if I had to do it all over again, I would. In the end, the judge charged me with assault and battery. The judge said that, even though it happened in my house, Ryan was still considered a guest, and I had no legal right to beat him the way I did. I could have asked him to leave, but instead, I nearly killed him. I was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Natalie left the courtroom in tears. I never spoke to her after everything went down, but one day, sitting alone in my cell, I decided to write her. There were things I needed to get off my chest. "Dear Natalie, I've always loved you, and I still do. I never cheated on you. If you ask Samantha at the bar, she'll set the record straight. My lawyer is sending you the divorce papers. You're too beautiful to be alone, and we both made our fair share of mistakes. I'll always regret what happened. Maybe if we'd communicated better, none of this would have unfolded the way it did. But it's too late now. Tell Logan and Chloe I love them. It's a shame their dad is now a criminal, but I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. That's not who I am. The one thing I regret most is that you didn't believe me. You tried to get even instead of talking to me. I hope you can find someone else, someone better. Please move on and forget about me. The divorce papers should arrive soon. Love. Ethan." I had the papers sent, and I gave Natalie everything we owned. I didn't need any of it anymore. In here, everything is taken care of. All I could do was focus on serving my time. Without any real skills outside of manual labor, I decided to enroll in some of the rehabilitation programs. Maybe, just maybe, I'd have a shot at a job when I got out. They placed me in a welding program. I had done some welding at my old job, but now I was working towards becoming a master welder. I thought it might give me a future after all of this. But every night, my thoughts drifted back to my family, to my kids growing up without me, and to Natalie trying to move forward. It weighed heavily on me. About 2 months later, I was told I had a visitor. I assumed it was my lawyer, probably with the final divorce papers. This prison had 2 types of visiting areas, one where you spoke through glass on a phone, and another where you sat face to face with minimal contact. They sent me to the latter. When I walked in, there she was, Natalie, sitting there with red, tear-filled eyes. "Hi, Natalie. What brings you here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't want the divorce," she said, her voice cracking as tears welled up again. "I'll wait for you, however long it takes. I don't want anyone else. I made a huge mistake by not trusting you, and I'll never make that mistake again." She paused, wiping her eyes, and continued, "You may not believe me, but I don't think I would have gone any further with Ryan. I felt so guilty. In a way, when you walked in, I was almost relieved. Now, everything's a mess, and I know I'm partly to blame." She looked down for a moment, then added, "I went to see Samantha at the bar, and she confirmed that you turned her down when she made a move. She said you told her you were happily married. When I told her about Ryan and the photos, she was furious. She even said she wanted to kill him. How are the kids holding up?" I asked, shifting the conversation away from all the guilt. "They're doing okay, all things considered. I had to sell the house. We couldn't afford to keep it. We're staying with my parents for now, and we're closing on the house next week." She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "I put all our furniture and your things in storage, so they'll be ready when you get out. I miss you so much, Ethan. I can't live without you. I love you." "I miss you too," I replied. "But you need to live your life. I can't expect you to wait around for me for 3 years. I'm not getting a divorce," she said firmly. "I'll wait for you, however long it takes. If you still want a divorce when you get out, I'll sign the papers then, but not before." We talked a little longer, and before she left, I asked the guard if I could kiss her goodbye. He allowed it, and she kissed me, her face damp with tears. She promised she'd visit every month, but I told her not to come that often, it would hurt too much every time she left. She agreed to visit every 3 months instead. Life in prison continued. I got letters from the kids about once a month, telling me about school and everything they were up to. Sometimes they'd send pictures, and there was one with Natalie smiling. It's the one I kept on my wall. I was doing well in the welding program, and my instructor even said he'd give me a recommendation when I got out. Natalie visited every 3 months, just like she promised. She told me things were getting better for her. She'd found a new job, managing a department at another store, and the pay was a bit better. Her parents were letting her save up so she could get back on her feet when the time came. One day I asked her, "What do your parents think of me now, with me being a felon and all?" "Mom and Dad still love you, Ethan," she said softly. "They know you lost your temper, but they were angrier with me for being so reckless. They said I was throwing away a good husband because we didn't talk. When they saw the divorce papers arrive, they asked me what I planned to do. When I tore them up right in front of them, they smiled." Another 6 months passed, and I was informed I had another visitor. But this time, they directed me to the area with the glass partition instead of the tables. I had no clue who it could be. When I arrived, I saw Ryan sitting on the other side, holding the phone. "What do you want, you piece of trash?" I growled, feeling my anger rise. "I just thought you'd like to know," he started with a smug grin. "I'm going to finish the job." "What the hell are you talking about?" I snarled. "The job of screwing your wife," he said, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "That's what I set out to do, and now I'm going to finish it. You know we've been seeing each other, right?" "You're a lying bastard," I spat. "When I get out of here, I'll finish what I started. I'll kill you." He just chuckled. "Maybe I'll even send you pictures of me with your wife. You could hang them up in your cell, he taunted, laughing. I'll find you and end you, I growled through the glass. Ryan laughed again, hanging up the phone casually as he walked away. Good luck with that, Ethan. I'll be long gone by then. Damn it. Things had been going relatively smoothly, and now this scumbag was back to stir things up again. I didn't believe for a second that Natalie was seeing him, but I had to warn her. I needed to call her. When I finally got access to a phone, it had to be a collect call. I just hoped they'd accept the charges. Logan answered. Dad? Hey, Dad. It's so good to hear your voice. I miss you a lot. I miss you too, Logan. But right now, I need to talk to your mom. I don't have much time. Is she there? Yeah, she's here. Mom, Dad needs you, I heard Logan call out. Then I heard Natalie's voice in the background. What's going on? She asked as she came to the phone. Ethan, is that you? What's wrong? Her voice was full of concern. She knew I wouldn't be calling unless it was something serious. Have you had any contact with Ryan lately? I asked, getting straight to the point. No, of course not. I hate that bastard for what he did to us. Why? What's going on? She asked, her voice tense with concern. He came to see me here earlier today, I explained. He claimed you two have been seeing each other. That's a lie, Ethan. A complete lie. You have to believe me, she said firmly. I believe you, Natalie, I replied. But I think he's up to something. I don't know what or when, but I've got a bad feeling. I'm worried he's going to try and get back at us. I'll die before I let that creep near me again, Natalie said, her voice strong. Don't worry. You taught me how to defend myself, and I'm ready. The police won't do anything unless something actually happens, so I'll be careful. Just watch your back, okay? I've got to go now. I love you, Natalie, I said, feeling the weight of worry settle in my chest. I love you too, Ethan. I'll be fine, she reassured me before we hung up. That was all I could do. Without any real proof, I couldn't make a bigger deal out of it. But for days after, I barely slept, my mind running wild with possibilities. About a week later, I had another visitor, this time at the tables. Mr. Dillon, I'm Lieutenant Collins, and this is Officer Morgan. We're from the sheriff's office, the man introduced himself. What's this about, Lieutenant? I asked, feeling a knot form in my gut. 3 days ago, Ryan Morgan was found shot dead near a bar you used to go to. We're wondering if you know anything about it. Also, do you own a firearm? The lieutenant asked, watching me closely. Lieutenant, I've been sitting in here for over 2.5 years because of that piece of trash, I said, shaking my head. There's no way I could have shot him from prison. And no, I don't own a gun. Natalie never allowed them in the house. We saw in the visitor log that he came to see you last week. What did he want? The lieutenant pressed. He came by to gloat, I replied. Just wanted to rub it in that I'm stuck here while he's out there, free. He was trying to mess with me, nothing more. Any idea who might have had a reason to kill him? The lieutenant asked, leaning in. Look, I don't care about Ryan. He's dead, and that's fine by me. I don't care who did it, but I hope they get away with it. His ex-wife wasn't thrilled with him either, from what I heard, I said, shrugging. What about your wife? Natalie, right? Think she might have had some interest in seeing him gone? The lieutenant suggested, giving me a pointed look. I laughed. Natalie? She doesn't have it in her to pull off something like that. Hell, when I beat him half to death, she wanted to call an ambulance. She's got 2 kids to take care of and is living with her parents. She barely has time to think, let alone plan something like this. The lieutenant nodded. All right, Ethan. Thanks for talking with us. Hey, are you going to tell me what you know about the shooting? I've told you everything I know, I asked. Fair enough, he said. Ryan showed up at Dan's bar around 7 in the evening. He was drinking, and at some point, he met a woman at the door, blonde, dressed to turn heads. She didn't go inside, so no one got a good look at her face. They both went out to the parking lot, and not long after, people inside heard 2 gunshots. By the time anyone got out there, Ryan was dead, 2 shots to the face, fired from a Luger. The woman was gone. We think she was involved, but we don't have any solid proof. Well, I can't help you there, but it sounds like he got what he deserved, I said, leaning back in my seat. I wanted to call Natalie and let her know she didn't have to worry about Ryan anymore, but I wasn't sure if my calls were being monitored. So, I kept quiet. The story about the shooting hit the papers, but no suspects were named. Of course, they mentioned me, given my history with Ryan, but everyone knew I had an alibi, I was behind bars. The following week, it was time for Natalie's visit. I couldn't have been happier to see her. As soon as she sat down, she asked, "Did you hear about Ryan?" "Yeah, the police came by to talk to me," I replied. "What about you? Did they question you?" "Yes, they came by," she said. I told them that, depending on the time of the shooting, I was either at work or on my way home. My parents vouched for me when I got back that evening. "Did they ask about us owning a gun?" I asked, leaning in a little. "Yes, they did," she said. "I told them exactly what you always said to tell them, that we didn't keep guns in the house." "And where's my Luger?" I asked, feeling a bit concerned. "You know, the one we got from that shady street vendor a few years back. It's probably in the storage unit with the rest of your stuff," she answered, sounding casual. "As long as you're safe, that's what matters," I said, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. "I've had a lot of time to think in here. Do you think when I get out, we can leave all this behind and start fresh?" She smiled softly at me. "I know we can. No more secrets, more talking, more understanding. I love you, Ethan. I always have, and I always will." A couple of months later, I got called into the warden's office. He told me I'd be getting an early release in just 2 weeks. I could hardly believe it. I rushed to the phone to call Natalie. "Honey, can you come pick me up in 2 weeks?" I asked, grinning ear to ear. "You mean come visit you?" she asked, sounding a little confused. "Of course I can." "No, not just visit," I said, barely able to contain my excitement. "Come get me. I'm getting out early." I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. "Oh my God, Ethan, when? What day? What time? I can't believe it." She was still crying when we hung up, and I couldn't stop smiling. 2 weeks later, I walked out of prison, and Natalie was there to pick me up in a different car. She mentioned the old one finally gave out. She looked stunning as she walked toward me, tears streaming down her face as she kissed me. I had tears in my eyes too. We headed to her parents' house, and outside was a sign that read, "Welcome home, Dad." The kids must have made it. They looked so grown up as I hugged and kissed them. That's when it really hit me, I hadn't seen them in 3 years, apart from the photos. Natalie's mom gave me a warm hug, and I shook her dad's hand. It felt so good to be surrounded by family again. I carried my small suitcase inside, where a few of our old friends had gathered to welcome me back. But I couldn't let Natalie out of my sight the whole time. "Honey, where am I sleeping?" I asked her. "In our bed, of course," she laughed. "We moved it downstairs a few days ago so we could have some privacy. It was Dad's idea, actually. But tonight, we're not staying here. I made reservations at a motel. I've missed you so much." After the party wound down, and I kissed the kids goodnight, Natalie let everyone know we'd see them tomorrow. They all understood we were heading off to spend some time alone together. While packing a few things, I noticed a blonde wig tucked in one of the drawers. Natalie walked in and saw me holding it. "I wore it once," she said, smiling. "But I think I'm better as a brunette, don't you?" She pointed to a couple of drawers where she'd placed some of my clothes. I packed a change for the night, and we headed out, talking about our future. We agreed that if either of us had any issues, we'd be honest and open. No more secrets. When we arrived at the motel, we decided to grab a drink first. Natalie looked absolutely stunning sitting at the table while I went to get our drinks. I noticed a man walking toward her and overheard their conversation. "Hey, gorgeous, you here by yourself?" he asked, leaning in. Natalie's voice was calm but firm. "Please leave. I'm married, and my husband will be back in a minute." The guy chuckled. "Why should I be scared of your husband?" That's when Natalie called out to me. "Ethan, honey, come here." The moment he glanced at me, his expression shifted, and he immediately backed off. "Sorry, ma'am." "Sir, my mistake." He practically bolted out the door. I walked over to Natalie, who was laughing. "What was that all about?" "He looked terrified," I said. She grinned. "Honey, you're a bit of a legend in this town. People still remember your name, especially after everything that went down with Ryan." We headed up to our room, and as we settled in, Natalie asked, "So, how do you want to spend the evening?" I smiled at her. "Let's just take it easy and enjoy being together again." Later, after some time relaxing and talking about our future plans, Natalie went to freshen up in the bathroom. I poured us each a drink and sat there thinking about how much I'd missed these simple moments with her. A couple of weeks later, I landed a job as a welder at a large firm. The man who hired me said they believed in second chances, as long as employees were reliable, showed up on time, and stayed out of trouble. He also mentioned that I came highly recommended, though he didn't say by whom. Within a few months, Natalie and I were able to rent a house with an option to buy. It was in the same neighborhood as her parents, and for the first time in years, we started feeling like a family again. Things were finally looking up. One day, we went to the storage unit to grab some of our things. As soon as we arrived, there they were, Lieutenant Collins, Officer Morgan, and two other officers, armed with a search warrant. My gut sank. I knew exactly what they were after, the Luger. They separated Natalie and me as they searched through the boxes. Sure enough, one of the officers emerged, holding the Luger in a plastic evidence bag, which he handed over to the lieutenant. Lieutenant Collins approached Natalie. "I thought you said you didn't allow guns in your house, Mrs. Carter." Natalie, staying calm, replied, "This isn't my house. It's a storage unit." The lieutenant gave her a knowing look. "Well, don't go far. We're going to have this Luger tested." After the police left, I turned to Natalie, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. "I thought you would have gotten rid of that gun. What are we going to do?" Natalie looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. "Do? What do you mean?" "Oh my God, Ethan, you don't think I killed Ryan, do you?" "I didn't. I don't know who did, but it wasn't me. I didn't even remember the gun until you brought it up." The next day, Lieutenant Collins showed up at our house again, Luger in hand. He explained that the gun had no firing pin, and its serial number had been filed off. In short, it was a useless weapon, likely untouched for years. Natalie told him to dispose of it, saying that guns weren't allowed in her home and she had no idea how it ended up in storage. She even suggested maybe one of the movers left it there. After that strange incident, life slowly returned to normal. The biggest lesson I took away from all of it was the importance of communication. If Natalie and I had been open with each other from the start, none of this would have happened. Sure, I could have divorced her, but in the end, we both would have lost more than we gained. Our relationship, especially our intimacy, became as strong as it had been in the early years. One thing's for sure, though, Natalie knows I'd never cheat on her, and she's well aware of the consequences if she ever cheated on me. It's almost amusing when we're out with friends. They always ask me for permission before they dance with her. I guess I'll be a local legend for a while. About a month ago, we got a call from Lieutenant Collins. He told us we were no longer under investigation for Ryan's murder. The real culprit had been found, Samantha, the woman from the bar. Turns out, Ryan had made advances on her, and she let him sleep with her. But Samantha wasn't just any woman, she was a black widow. She seduced men and then killed them. The police were investigating another case of infidelity when they caught Samantha with a different man at a bar. A search of her car turned up a blonde wig and a Luger in the trunk. She eventually confessed to killing Ryan and 3 other men, all of whom had cheated on their wives. Her first victim had been her own husband in Atlanta, found murdered behind a bar. That's when it hit me, if I had cheated on Natalie, I could have been the one lying dead in an alley.